very, very, boy, what the concert, a virtual streaming platform that OSA has developed, Concert Tata, the amount of technology behind what they did last week for the LPS sessions was incredible. I was really, really surprised. It just, they have a lot of technology in their situation over there.
I was really impressed how they ran things from backstage, and we were all stage managed.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't wait to share the photos of the virtual backstage area with you. There are multiple laptops, and every position has its own laptop, and the switching station was like full on video control. It was the concert, virtual.
Sorry.
Quite impressive. I heard me. I'm like, I
I
started
know.
looking around.
Sorry,
I'm like,
I was setting
what?
up YouTube and doing it in a really, really terrible fashion. I'm like, I'm not on my game this morning. What can I say?
Hey, Elise Turner's birthday.
All right.
Birthday, Elise.
Happy birthday to
Birthday,
Elise, who's
Elise.
our friend and colleague and been with us
birthday.
from the very beginning. She's cool beans, yo.
Well, it looks like our YouTube channel is up and running.
It is.
To get
We're
this
live.
conversation started, welcome back to another episode of TM 101. We've made it to episode number 67. If you have yet to change your chat settings, please make sure to do that. That helps us address your questions and stay up to date on the chat room. Also, going back to a little bit of last week, thanks to everyone at the Live Production Summit. We had an incredible week there, getting to touch base on just about everything going on in the live production world. Also, if you're on Clubhouse, we're doing a Clubhouse chat every Wednesday. Unfortunately, I have yet to jump onto the Clubhouse platform, but my wonderful colleagues are running Clubhouse every week, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Also, if you've yet to join our YouTube channel, please join and subscribe. And that helps you stay up to date with everything that's going on with TM 101. But to get the episode introed, I'm going to pass it over to MJ. We are talking bookkeeping today, and we are excited to be back and get our core classes going. So
Yeah.
pass it over to MJ.
Thank you, Mark. This is one that people have been requesting for a while, and we've just had so many other things that are amazing to talk about and topical that we're finally getting there. So we're going to talk about tour bookkeeping today. Bookkeeping is the recording of financial transactions. It involves preparing documents for all transactions and operations and other events of business. Those can include purchases, sales, receipts, and payments. And today we're going to talk about the different ways we organize our bookkeeping on the road. And this is by no means for you who are people who are out there who are like proper CPA accountants. This is how we handle things on the road, and we get it to business managers. And a production accountant or a tour accountant or tour manager, if you're handling tour accounting, it's almost kind of more like a cross between a bookkeeper and an auditor. You know, it's a really kind of, I don't know if I'd say specialized, but we're very nimble with how we deal with what goes on the road and how we manage all these receipts in different countries and different cities and get them to the business managers and accountants so they can put financials together. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and how we deal with that in our various ways. And hopefully that will help you guys, save you guys some pain in organizing. So I'm going to start by talking to 5-1. On the road, bookkeeping is typically what we call single entry bookkeeping or ledger accounting or ledger bookkeeping. It's basically like a checkbook for all intents and purposes, where we keep a running total of the inflows, so like cash pickups, and outflows like receipts paid, or if we send cash back to the office. And we usually start out by asking the business manager how they want our bookkeeping to be set up. And there's no one industry standard. Sometimes they want something super simple, like ridiculously simple, which I'm going to share with you in a minute here. This was surprisingly from, here it is, from an arena level tour that was just doing a 1 week. Bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to get to open here. Sorry, it just doesn't want to open. There we go. That was doing a 1 week run actually it was 2 weeks up the West Coast of America. And the business manager, and we were hardly using any cash. And the business manager just wanted something incredibly simple. I mean, this is probably the most simple thing that I've ever done. You guys see that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is how simple it can get. And this is what the business manager wanted. So yeah, this was I don't think it'll let me zoom in. I literally just kept a list of all of the receipts and their totals. She didn't even want a running total subtracting. She just wanted to have a list of all of the receipts, income, like which was the cash pickups I had done, total outflow, total cash pickups or income, and what was to be returned. That's what they wanted. And that, like I said, this was for a 2-week run of an arena level act up the West Coast. So, you know, as I said, it can be that simple. But usually often the business management company is happy to get the cash files in whatever form we prefer, you know, that we're comfortable with. And when this is the case, 5-1 and myself, and actually half this panel and a lot of other tour managers we know have a particular sheet we really like. And so I'm going to ask 5-1 to share that and go through it with us because I love it. And
Thanks,
yes, Mark, there was
MJ.
not one account code on that.
But you're going to see one on this one.
You're going to see many on this. We like the codes. All
Can you
right.
guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of us on here, this summary probably looks very similar to one that we all use or have seen in the past. So and Mark O'Shea, here's all of the codes that I use. And of course, these are the codes that I've come up with. And a lot of times the business managers will give you different codes. So how I do stuff, of course, you put in the date. And what I wanted to ask my esteemed panel, does it really matter to you guys if you have the day? So like maybe Monday, January 20th. So it doesn't really matter to you guys?
No.
Okay, great. So I put in under the vendor, what it is, the tour cash. So my code was 1001, which was my startup cash from the tour. So you'll see, I already had 50 grand on me that was left over from the previous tour. So I just kept that in my safe. That's in my production case. So I had an additional $85,000 that came from the business manager to kind of help me get started on the tour. So everything that I've broken out is coded. So you'll see 1001 is cash from office, 1002 is cash to the office, and yada, 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 yada. So in my disbursements, anything that's associated with the tour expenses might have, like airfares, baggage, artist incidentals, auto rental, couriers and messengers. And we're going to broach the subject about currency exchange later on in this panel, how you deal with different currencies when you're overseas. Dressing room supplies, blah, blah, blah. You'll see everything. And so what I've done is as I'm entering stuff, you would enter it in as a negative or a positive if it was income. And if you scroll down here, it'll give you the total disbursements that I did for the whole week of this tour. And as you see, it was the first week of the tour, January 20th to 26th. This was last year, of course. And then what it does is it'll give you a running tab of what you spent on each of those things. So for this week, I knew that what I spent in catering was $12,500, blah, blah, blah. So all the way down. So my beginning balance was the 50K that I already had on hand. On this report, $210,000. And then my ending balance, which correlates with this, was $265,5847. So with this part of this summary, one of the things that MJ and I have been working on, and also Rocky, who is one of our esteemed people who watch us on here, is we've been coming up with a summary. So at the end of a tour, everything from each week. I know what I spent on each week, and then it also tabulates at the end. And this was going to be a 42-week tour. So as you see that we were in the beginning stages of the pandemic and things were getting ready to get shut down. So I didn't fill in all the extra weeks. But the reason why I like having a running summary, so at the end of a tour, having a grand total for the business managers, they're not asking you, hey, what did we spend on wardrobe? So when we have the next leg of the tour, we know how to budget that. We have a running total of everything, of all the individual things that we spend on a tour. So not only will it help you budget for your next run, if you need to account for more things or less things on the tour, but it also helps the business manager. So let's just say next year you have a tour that's going to be almost the same amount of trucks or buses or staffing or anything. You can pull up your previous year's budget and you have those numbers, and then you can just work off of that to kind of help you. So that's my spreadsheet. And Adrian, did you raise your hand?
I did, sir. I had a question.
Okay.
So this
Fire.
is still 100% cash flow management, correct?
Yep. Correct.
So when you're talking about your catering and disbursements in that regard, that is potentially anything you might be coming out of cash pocket for,
Yep.
like your after shows and your ancillary catering expenses, not specifically show catering. These are not show expenses.
Yeah, that's totally a separate thing. And we have pretty much the same sheet that we would do for credit card reconciliation type things also. So when I do mine, I have, at the end of the week, I will send this sheet as a PDF to the business manager. And then I would also send a separate one with the credit card reconciliation stuff, also with the Amex PDF bill. I'm seeing some questions or some comments here, but that's how I do stuff. Henry? Yes, sir.
Did I see on the bottom of that sheet, merch income? Did you take cash in at the end of that tour?
Well, on that tour, it was going to be a little different because, merch doesn't even come across our desk because the merch company is a totally separate thing. So on this one, why I had merch income on this one is because at the particular end of that week, our merch guy wanted to dump some cash. So I just took it into my.
Got it. Makes sense. I just wanted to point that out so our students know that that's not a normal thing.
Correct.
On a certain higher level of touring. You're not ever taking cash in from the merch sales.
Yeah. And the other reason why I take it is because I usually have, like all of us, we usually have a safe in our production case. So, and the merch guy usually doesn't, or just has a cash bag. So I just took it, put it in my safe, and whenever he needed it.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You referenced that being a 42-week tour. So that's an album cycle, right? How often, that's not the one continuous long run. How often do you see business managers preferring that as an option to accounting and for each tour as an individual block? Let's say you do 4 weeks in Europe, followed by 6 weeks in the US, and treating those as separate things rather than it all being on the one document.
I'd like to keep everything for me on one document, but you can always break out the same document by
leg
tour segments. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so by leg. So
I usually break it out by leg.
I try to settle each leg.
yeah,
Just
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. I usually do each leg as well. I have two questions.
Can I just ask before you do that, an extension of that question? Because I do legs as well, but what always trips me up a little bit is festival season, because that could be 3 weeks in Europe doing festivals, but it could also be a one-off fly to Denver for a festival, or Florida, whatever it be. How do you guys approach that? I'm just curious to see what everyone does.
So for me, the last few years, I've been the tour accountant for an artist that will do 4 to 5 huge one-offs per year. And so for me, I think that would be kind of similar. So for me, having that ongoing relationship, I just keep the cash and I turn in the cash accounting for each, but I roll over the cash to the next one because they know me, they trust me. And I keep enough to start with. So I think that into festival season like that, I would do the same thing, because it's nice to have, it can be really challenging sometimes to pick up cash at a festival. So I like to roll it over. I don't roll the accounting over. I close out the cash accounting
Exactly.
per gig, but I keep the cash and keep rolling it over.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. And for me, Doug, if it's a string of festival shows that are in one run, then I try to do it that way. But again, we'll talk currencies in a second. But let's say that there's a string of festival shows going on in Europe and we're going to do those. Then we're going to settle that. If we bounce back to, say, North America and we hit one Canadian festival, then that will have its own as well. I kind of go in logistical blocks with how I go back to what my receipt settlement's going to be.
Yeah, totally. Me too. My two questions. First of all, because I know we all have an opinion on this. Does it matter to you that your receipts go in your sheet in order of date, or do you just throw them all in there and put the date of the receipt on there?
I like to go by date, but I mean, obviously sometimes they don't, but I like to keep them in chronological order as much as possible.
Henry, you're muted, darling.
I would go by date because, I mean, we're talking about possibly different currencies and I'm moving between countries. That date's going to matter sometimes. But also I think another point we're all about to make is maybe in currencies, we split up our sheets, or you're not combining currencies. It'll just eat you alive if you try to do that. But yeah, I would separate it that way.
For me, it depends on what my cash reconciliation process is for that particular client. Because as we touched on yesterday, sometimes it's receipt by receipt by receipt by receipt. Sometimes, and so that I hope to always have that in a chronological order since we're drilling it down to the, infinite little receipt. But if I'm grouping by expense category, because for example, if there's a huge amount of receipts, then it's got to be wardrobe, dressing room supplies, miscellaneous catering, production supplies in a group. And I add, and I do that, sort of the expense, and I tape them accordingly. So the line item number and the receipt package number is what corresponds. I try to put a date in there so we know where in the tour it's happening. And then that's tangential to another conversation that we'll have about how we do our cash flow management on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to keep them kind of chronological, but I don't worry too much about it because I'm more concerned about them matching up with my entry, that they're in the order, like however I scan them or whatever, it matches up with my entry in the ledger, so.
And sometimes you get receipts that come in to you from different people at different times. So, I forgot to give you this receipt.
Kind of a taxi receipt from the beginning of the tour.
Yeah, the last day of the tour, like 3 months later, you're like, oh, here's my taxi receipt.
Taxi receipt from the last run.
But if something comes in late, I just put it in there and make a note of it.
Yeah.
It's not.
I want to make a note that these, everyone typically has a variant on a theme with these, but it really comes down to what works for you and your business manager at the end of the day in your organization. There's no right or wrong answer. I work to a document.
Tour to tour.
Exactly. With one of my artists, I work to a document that has the budget built into the same document as the cash sheet. So it auto-populates a summary so you can be looking at budget versus actual in real time. But it doesn't break down per week. And it's a document that's been refined over years and years of different clients and different TMs working on it. So once you get so deep in those, the formula are so interconnected that you have to be careful when you're messing around with it, because so many people have messed around with it. But ultimately it depends on your usage and the business manager's usage.
Yeah. And also something
100%.
to be aware of is that when you're being asked to send things a certain way or make notes a certain way, the business manager and the financial team is organizing those in a completely different way. Like they may be in, on their end, they may be sorting some of these things into like capital expenses or operating expenses or, different kinds of stuff that we don't really touch on the road. So if they ask you to do things a certain way or enter things a certain way, for their purposes, you just kind of have to go along with that. Now, for me, like we've talked about in budgeting before, I always keep my own budgets and do a budget to actual so that I can keep my own roadmap, but I'm usually not doing it in the software or spreadsheet or whatever it is, like, like Doug was talking about the master sheet that business management gives me, because they have a reason for how they have you doing things.
Yeah.
So
Fast question in the chat from Dave Oken, who asks, 5-1, do you include any chargebacks in your sheet? And I'm going to probably say no, because it's not, unless
Well,
only if it's being paid out in cash.
Is it chargebacks to the artist, David?
Right.
Dave?
That's the question, Dave.
Because I have an answer for that one. I've done it.
Yeah.
You go, well, go ahead, MJ.
Well, I just want to make sure if that's what he's talking about.
Well,
He
So
says,
you answer 5-1 and then I'll.
so
Wait, 'cause
the
I-
follow-up to Dave's question is, I know that you have it showing as cash, though knowing you're mentioning having numbers in order for future business manager forecasting, I wasn't sure if you have separate fields for chargebacks.
So if you mean for artist chargebacks, like sometimes some artists have an agreement, like say you have 5 equal partners in a band and there's certain expenses that maybe I pay out on the road. Like maybe when we're leaving a hotel, I'm paying all their incidentals. They don't pay anything out of their pocket. They don't go to the desk. That's a really easy one. I will make a note of those, and I do have a code for each one of those 5 people, and I enter it as a bill back. And at the end of the tour, the business manager then goes back and does like an accounting personally with each one of the band members. So I do keep a line item for each band member if that's a thing. Yeah. Almost every artist I work with, even if it's just like one principal, if they're like, oh, I'm going to go buy a motorcycle, it's like, pay for that for me on the credit card. It's like that's a chargeback. That's not a tour cost.
I've
Yeah,
even
my
had to
last
do that with
fact,
cars, with car services too. And if one guy wants a car every day and the other principal doesn't want a car, just making sure that gets brought into that principal's account.
And sometimes you have to ask management about that. I mean, it depends on, sometimes your artist, you can say, is this your charge? Is this your personal charge? Like most artists I've worked with, but sometimes you need to ask management if you're not clear, and that's perfectly acceptable. Or business management. And sometimes they want to have that conversation.
Yeah,
With the
I've
artist.
had that before where they want me to not me decide if it's a personal expense. Just tell them what it is. Just, it was an artist's expense. It was for this. They may have another better way to categorize that where it's still a business expense, but for us, it looks like it was like, oh, it was a personal car, but technically it's still a business expense for their legal entities. So I've known to sort that out and just be very clear about what it was, and then let them decide kind of where it falls in the tax bracket.
Same thing goes with the meals. Sometimes I've had meals go like you want to go to one specific artist, or they want it to be a tour meal, or you just got to know what goes where.
And if
And
you're not
those
sure,
are all the important things of having those very important first conversations with business manager before you even leave out the door.
and if you're not sure when you're on tour, just ask.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the business manager or their team does not get to your bookkeeping for weeks, sometimes months.
Yeah.
And so you will sometimes 6 months down the road get asked, what was this for? And it's
Write
it's
it on
not
the
so much they
receipt.
want to know what it's for, it's they want to know how to categorize it, because they're now into their taxes, or they're, like I said, doing some, big accounting of the whole firm.
Especially
so-
credit card expenses. A lot of times they'll do the cash, but credit cards they won't look at till tax season, and then all of a sudden you're 6 months have gone by and you're like trying to remember that day. And with that,
I always have a notes section on
Mhm.
each
Yes,
page.
me too.
So, maybe I'm not using it all the time, but if something comes up, I can put it in there, and, it helps them 6 months down the line. It could be principal bought X for X, so that's useful. But I actually wanted to ask you guys about codes, because I don't use codes. I never have. And what are you delineating with those codes? Different types of expenditure, or Do you have like a set grid with the business manager, so they have a list of your codes so they can reference it, or what?
Do you want me to share this screen again so I can show you, Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, the codes
Yeah.
are generally generated by the business manager. They're cash
Right.
in, they're cash in, cash out, and where things are their allocation codes
Yeah.
based on
But not
expense.
always. They don't always give
But
it
as-
to you.
No, they don't
Right, and
always,
it's
and they don't
usually
always want
don't.
it.
I usually have accountants
Yeah.
tell them not to worry about that because they want to put it into the codes. They want to deal with it. They just want the numbers
Right.
from me. They'll put it into the books with codes. In almost
Yeah,
every
and every
store I've
business
been on.
manager's different for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
But I mean, do you
my-
assign your own codes usually? Like for me, I've worked with one business manager that's assigned codes, but the other ones haven't. And I love it when they are assigning codes because it's part of their entire accounting system. And
Right.
so it
Mhm.
helps me to match it up. Like if they have a question for me or they need to pull a report and send it to me, but not
Okay,
I
so
usually-
I've seen both sides of the fence for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
my formats tend to be a little different to that, where my different expense line items, if you will, are in separate columns. So it runs across. You have on the left hand side, you have, sorry, I realize I'm explaining a spreadsheet to you, which is probably useless, but it performs the same function just without codes. And you total the line items at the bottom. But
the
yeah,
thing that's,
I
I know
understand.
exactly what sheet you're talking about because I know what you're talking about where it goes across the top and it's
Yeah.
columns. But the reason that I like codes is that they're a really good way to summarize expenses by category.
Yeah.
And if you're real nerdy on Excel, you can run different, yes, like if I wanted, you can actually use them in tables and you can use them in formulas. Well, which is basically what 5.1's sheet is. You're just summarizing everything, and it provides a nice mathematical way to do it. But like I said, everybody's different, everybody works differently. But I do prefer when the business management is using accounting codes, because when they run reports or send budgets, it matches up so nicely.
I
But
think
I don't know
that's
why nobody does.
I think that's the benefit, the matching up of it, because they're having to go back and pull everything from your spreads and things like that to fit into their system. So when they provide their system, it makes life a lot easier.
And
Yeah.
it's less work for them. Sorry, Henry.
No, it's okay, because it's not even just also for their benefit, but I found a lot of benefit in coding it that way, because when I say we take a break or something, I don't know, we come back a year later after they've recorded the album, we got to start a new tour, new budget. What did we spend in wardrobe last time around? What did we spend in pyro last time around? Or you know what I mean? Well, pyro wouldn't be in cash, but you know what I mean? I've coded every category of the tour. So I've already got like a rough budget to start with. And so that was like a big benefit to me, because I already knew what we spent. As long as it was a similar size tour, similar number of people, it helped me. And I could take that to another tour. Yeah, I just did a tour with the same amount of people, 4 or 5 buses. Yeah, actually, I just did a budget that's going to be pretty darn close. Let me keep this format and reference it, and then just change the dates, and boom, what would have a budget that probably, starting from scratch, I would have taken so much time to do my due diligence to get those numbers, but then I can just reference it from before. And that's the great thing about the experience that you get from every tour, is that if you can retain this stuff, you get faster at it every time.
I have a question for all of you. We'll start with 5.1. What is your routine for entering in receipts and as they come in, and how often do you enter them? We'll start with 5.1. We'll go around the room.
I love this question. When I first started, one of my mentors, who is an amazing tour accountant, I asked him, do you do your receipts at the end of the week? Do you do them at the end of the month? He said, no, I do my receipts daily. And I've taken that as a great learning lesson, because if you're doing your receipts, even if you're doing your last receipt before you get in the bunk on your bus, you've got that nagging thing. Did I lose a receipt? Did someone not give me a receipt? If you do all of your receipts day by day, by the end of the week, when it comes around for Sunday for you to close out your books, you've got your work done. You're not having to worry about, okay, now I got to spend all day Sunday entering in all these receipts and stuff. So I do mine day by day. And then at the end of the week, it just makes my weekend so much easier. How about you, Mark? Sorry.
I totally agree. I use the same setting and mindset. I add it to my daily to-do list. I'm compiling all my receipts during the day, making sure everything's in order to save so much time towards the end of the week. Once you have all that compiled and you've done your due diligence to stay on top of it on a daily basis, you're not sitting with a huge pile of receipts and you're like, oh, now I've got to use an entire off day to run through that. I think that it's going to save you in the long run, taking care of it and filing them as best as you can on a daily basis. For sure. You want Adrian? You want to take it for me?
Muted.
Chatter. It really depends on the size of the tour and how scrambled up I am at the end of the day. I do still do lots of coordinating because I like it. And sometimes I take on these big nuts tours with 11 buses. And so here's my secret for the end of the night scramble with my runners. Okay. So always settle with the runners. Don't ever not settle with the runners. No matter how much time you don't or don't have, get those receipts, look at them, tell your runners to circle the date and the total, and then make sure that you tabulate and settle with them. What'd you give them? What's back? Make sure that you look and see if there were any returns or any partial returns. Did something get returned and that's 86'd out? Or did you have a receipt where one item got returned? Now you've got a little bit of a chargeback inside a cash reconciliation situation. Make sure that you settle with all those runners. Then what I do is I take an envelope, I put the runner's name, the city, the date, the amount of money that I handed that runner, the total of the receipts that are in the envelope, and then the balance, which is, if it's a very busy time, I'm going to put the change from the runner in there too. Now I have reconciled completely, and I think I know that I'm square. But if I'm going to go back to this the next morning after I've loaded in and now I'm getting my day set up, I might do it. I might look at it again and do the next day, or I might wait a couple of days, put all of these into an envelope. And then when I have a second and there's a lull for 45 minutes, then I'm going to go through. That's why I think settling with your runners, making sure that your runners are sorted, they're done, you're reconciled. And then you have these little tiny, I call them little mini reconciliations that you go back to, and you enter things into your spreadsheet in a more organized manner. That's that one. Also, if I'm doing a lot of different bus floats, I may also give each bus their own envelope, so that when I'm sending runners out to do bus stock, each bus has its own envelope. It has its own list, and it has its own float for bus stock shopping. That way, if we have a situation, where and this gets tedious, but it happens. If we have a situation where each bus has their own, and maybe one bus isn't really eating and drinking that much and another bus is, that bus can carry over their individual float. And maybe they want to get a bottle of something expensive because they've got some float left over. So it's just sort of an accounting method that helps us to stay organized while allowing maximum sort of personalization, if you will. And that's a whole nother story that we talk about, get into
Mary
that.
Jo,
But
what's your routine?
Well, I like to do them in the morning. I shoot for doing them every day, but sometimes, like Adrian said, like you just don't, even if I'm just doing like tour accounting or if I'm the tour manager and I have my own float, then I'm dealing with my own cash floats and there's a tour accountant. Sometimes I just don't have time, but I shoot for it. I really like, because the morning's really quiet. So for me, it's really relaxing to just sit and do my receipts with like a cup of tea. And
I also never want to do it tired. I never want to reconcile when I'm not feeling,
So
you know,
that'll screw up.
100.
I need
because-
to sleep at
Yeah,
night. So
I
like,
can't
and
do.
usually
I
it's
can't
really
reconcile
late.
when I'm exhausted.
So yeah.
Advice.
So I usually try to do it in the morning, even if it's like the morning after a day off and I have, you know, a lobby call. Sometimes with the band, we're doing a day drive. And so if I'm with the band, the lobby call's not till like 11 or 12. I like to get up really early, sit and watch some trashy TV in the background.
Mhm.
There was one whole run that I did where my every morning when I was doing receipts, Charmed was on. And so like I
Law
watched
and
that.
Order is my thing. Law and Order in the background almost every time I'm working. It's weird, but that just happens to be
You just get in
that.
the zone. So that's my routine. I try to do it in the morning and it's a nice start to my day. You feel like you accomplished something. So yeah, that's my routine.
Henry, what's your routine?
It depends on the size tour. You know, if I'm doing it, then for some reason I was brought up and trained to like, I still do it on the days off. And so I still fall into that. On the days off, I'll do it. But you know, if it's a larger tour, maybe my coordinator's doing it and I'm just like sending them receipts. It depends, you know. I was gonna say, like, for the routine, in my routine, I like to save runner lists, especially when we're talking about cash. Like, I found that having that clipboard of the runner list in the office, just saving all of those sheets and being able to, when I do my accounting, be able to flip back a few pages and see what was requested by who or where the cash went. Sometimes that has really saved my ass in some differences because I had the information. So saving runner lists is something that like don't normally do, but is found to be very beneficial. And then I take advantage of cloud-based folders. You know, I take pictures of everything. You don't got to worry about losing those physical receipts if you've taken a picture of it and it's on the cloud in a couple places. So over the years, I've done anything from, I have massive photo albums of every receipt on tours in iPhoto, or for some years I used Neat, like Neat Cloud. If you guys remember that, it was a scanning based system that would like 90% of the way get it would scan the receipt and correctly put it into a sheet for you.
I still have my little Neat receipt scanner.
Yeah. And then, you know, when you could do it with your phone, when I was using Neat a lot, I would just take like rapid fire snapshot, snap of all the receipts, and then just put it in my pocket and fall asleep and let the cloud scan the receipt. And in the morning, it was like 80 to 90% correct because it was trying to recognize the information on the receipts. And sometimes it couldn't get it, but it would give me a head start. And then I had to kind of fix it, but that can be a little dangerous. So you have to be very careful how you do it. I've experimented with so many different systems now, but no matter what, they're all not accident proof. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna get tired. You're gonna get backed up. And so that's why for me, like, taking pictures was sort of my don't lose it if I have a photo of it in my phone. So that's my routine.
Doug, what's your, and I got another question for you too. What's your routine? And I got a question for you when you're done with that.
Yeah, very similar to Henry's, and I'm sure everyone else's. I got into a habit because, you know, receipts get lost, and Aaron's making some great points in the chat about the ink running off of receipts if they're rustling around. That's a really good point, and you can't make out what the amount was. For me, I got into the habit of, soon as the receipt touches my desk or my hand, I take it. I use TurboScan. The premium one is great. It's cost like $6. It is an excellent platform. And it has integration with Dropbox and Drive, which is my chosen platform. You can take a picture, it turns it into a scan automatically. 90% of the time it's great. You can either save it on the app there and then and update it to the cloud later if you're really in a bind, which I sometimes do. So if I get handed a ton of receipts while somebody's talking in my other ear, I'm still doing that because it's become a reflex, but I can do something else at the same time. And then the hard copy goes into one of two pending folders. So I have plastic folders that live with my backpack. So they're on me at all times. One for cash, one for credit card. And those are my pending folders. Goes in there. I know I haven't filed it yet. It's protected. It's not getting scratched around in my bag. And it, you know, I will endeavor to file it at the end of the day. But as Adrian said, some days you just don't get around to it. You just, sometimes you just have to go to bed and leave work on your desk. So that's me.
Yeah, I use Scanner Pro. I find it's really easy to use. I've been using that for like 10 years.
I do too.
Scanning. Just
I use
get it
Scan Pro.
close, boom, it takes it, and it sends it off. Doug, and anybody else who's got any input on this, what happens if you lose a receipt?
Well, I mean, for me, using the scanner app has almost eliminated that because I don't lose it in a digital form. So I have no excuse for losing receipts because that means I've forgotten to take a picture of it or scan it and upload it to the cloud. It's such a foolproof way of doing things. I always have my phone on me, so it takes 2 seconds to do that. And if it means, give me 1 sec, click, okay, let's go. That's all it takes. So it really, that was my sort of, prior to those scanning apps, it was a different situation, and I would lose receipts occasionally. I think it depends on what it is. If it's $40 for something at Guitar Center, I would put it through and beg forgiveness from my business manager and just put a note saying lost receipt. I don't know how you guys would.
Yeah, there's a little bit of beg for forgiveness there because whether it's $40 or $400 or something, like, crap, you don't ever want to lose a receipt, but it's not the end of the world. You're not going to get fired. Write it down, have a receipt book, or type it in Word and print it out and write lost. And every detail you can imagine, or every detail you recall, and like write it on the receipt. Have the runner sign it. You sign it. Make it as
That's a good note, Henry. Is always have a receipt book with you.
And to that
I was going to add to
point,
that as well.
And to that point, to the always, that's super important. Always have a receipt book. I also have runners sign out the receipt as to how much I have floated them out.
Oh yeah.
So that they're
signatures on everything.
Email, or I'll send an email or a text to them just to, if I'm in a rush and I'm the only person, like I got a couple runners, I'm running everything with a smaller tour. I'll just send a text because I got a text anyways and said I gave you this and have them okay it on a text. So that way
I try to have my receipt book in my my morning bag that I have with me before the cases roll. Everything I need to start the day, they sign out, and even if that is a post-it. Even if it's a post-it, I gave Steve $500. I just want to know, because if we have a number of runners or a number of things happen and I'm going to look at you 5 hours and go, what, how much did I, it's just things you're not infallible. You're not perfect. You're not expected to have every single thing that you do over the course of a day committed to memory. So make things easier for yourself by developing little habits that are personal to you.
I just wanted to add is that's absolutely correct. And I just wanted to add as a caveat to what I said before, it's all, if you've got a lost receipt, it's almost always going to be something small, because if it's any significant value, you're going to go and chase that receipt up, whether it's a hotel, an airline, or a big purchase at Guitar Center. You just call Guitar Center and say, hey, I need a reissue of my receipt. Can you email me? And, there are almost no situations where you're going to have a high value receipt that you can't get a copy of.
Yeah. And adding to the receipt book, I always try to find 3-part receipt books. So I will do, like, say I'm giving the runner a receipt. I've handed them $500. I have them hold on to one. Then I have one that I can turn in if I need to. That would be different for the runner. But let's say that I have to write up a receipt for something, handwritten receipt. Somebody has delivered something and I'm going to pay them $50 for delivery and they don't have a receipt. So I'm going to write one up. I write one up. That's going to go in my receipts that I scan. I hand them one so they have a copy. And I have receipt books with that third copy going back like 5 years right now, somewhere in a box. And they have saved my ass like down the road, or if I'm like trying to remember something. So I always have at least a duplicate, but I prefer triplicate. And the second thing that I was going to say is that I have this policy that everybody knows on tour. Like if somebody needs to get reimbursed, say there's a crew member that needs to get reimbursed for a taxi receipt, and they just try to hand it to me and they say, I'll get the money later because they're in a rush. I will not take a receipt from somebody unless I have exchanged it for cash.
Yeah.
Because
Same.
if I have a receipt in my envelope, if I've scanned it, if I just have it on my person in my brain, that means to me that I have exchanged that for cash, and it will absolutely throw off my accounting if I did not. So I always tell people, like, don't take a receipt unless you paid for it. So that's my 2 cents. 5-1, did you have something?
So I had 2 questions actually. So with what you just said, do you also put a time limit on when they can turn in those receipts? Let's say if it's a taxi receipt and they give it to you like 2 weeks later, do you give them a time limit, a set, or do you just like,
If it's going
it's
like
no big deal?
If it's going to the hotel, the airport, like the beginning of a tour, I just want it to be done before that leg because you're closing out that leg. I mean, I've had techs go to Guitar Center on their day off and, get a part and forget to turn in that receipt till 2 weeks later. And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, they actually saved a run for the runner. So I can do them a solid and pay for that taxi receipt.
I have a question on that same note. Is if you're getting receipts, you set up times that they can come and get that money from you? Do you have office hours where you say, I will pay bills on this day? Do you do that, or you do just whenever they walk into your office, you pay it?
For me, it depends on the tour. If it's like a little one-off or if it's small, it's like I can get it whenever. It's pretty manageable. But yes, on the bigger stuff, like for example, when I was saying I do the tour accounting for an artist that does like 4 or 5 big one-offs, it's like you got to come in at like before we start, like during one of the load-in days when I'm in the office, it's just easier because I want to get that stuff out of the way.
Yeah, if there's so many people on the tour, you can't just like have that open door policy. You'd be dealing with them all day long. I used to do what 5-1 I learned from you, dude, was like you just get on the radio and say the bank is open. If you need anything, the bank is open for the next hour.
Yeah.
And that was your window,
Yeah.
All right.
Mark, on to you.
Yeah, let's talk credit card receipts briefly. On most tours, you will have a tour credit card. If you are a new tour manager and setting up your first tour, never use your own card. We cannot put more emphasis on that. Never use your own card. Ask business management if they can get you your own tour credit card, preferably an Amex. These are very easy for business management to set up for you. We're going to work under the assumption that you have a tour Amex, since that's what most business management companies will give tour managers. Passing a question over to 5-1. 5-1, do you use the same form you showed us earlier for credit card charges? How do you keep track of credit card charges?
I do use the same form.
Done. Click the continue to installation button and follow the instructions.
All right.
Did you guys hear that? I thought I was going bonkers for a second there.
Sorry about that.
I do use the same sheet, but I just rename it. I mean, like I use the same format, but it's just a total separate sheet, and it's renamed credit card reconciliation because I'm going to use the same codes that I was using on the cash reconciliation. So it also makes it a little bit easier for the business managers. But I'm very curious of how you guys do it, and I'll start with Henry.
I'm so sorry. What was that question?
What is pi r squared times 6 divided by 3?
Oh, hang on a second. I'll Google it.
No. Do you use a separate sheet for credit card charges, or do you put everything on a one sheet when you're
Oh wow, that would
how do
be
you do
weird
credit
to
card
put it
stuff?
all together. I've never done that. Would be gumbo, dude. Like to mix credit card and cash. No way. You keep it separate. That's a different thing. At least in my book. And then it's funny. I don't feel like I've done a credit card like like an Excel sheet for a credit card in a long time. A lot of the time we're just coding the statements. The monthly Amex statement is usually what I have to do, and then it varies on business management whether they want me to keep the hard receipts or not. But I found in the last couple of years, most business managements have really like the reporting capabilities that Amex gives you and the little features they give. And so I honestly can't remember the last time I had to code a credit card report on Excel, to be honest.
I wanted to just add that Amex is quite US focused. It's something I've only ever used with US artists. So it's going off in the chat right now. Some people in Europe, Amex is less common in certain parts of Europe. Just wanted to add that as a caveat.
Yeah, I have used a MasterCard, although I have worked for a UK artist that we did have Amex, but I think it just depends on where you're touring mostly, you know. But I do have to say that, like, in reporting, like you guys said, Amex has the tools that just make it so easy. So like on the tour that I had the MasterCard, I didn't really have access to see that. I just had to wait for statements and keep really good records.
And Amex also gives you all those extra points that the artist can use, like for flights, for hotels, you know, all those other points that you can tabulate. I'm sorry, Mark.
I know it's all good. I feel like consensus wise between us, and it's, you know, more focused in the States, it's going to vary artist to artist, but we are commonly seeing the Amex card. Most touring bands will have their own band card or an Amex that's issued through their business manager, which is something common that we do see.
There's a good question in the chat, actually, from Louisa. Would you typically have different credit cards for different legs of the tour? And if you don't mind, I would answer this. Working for international artists, that depends on how the business manager has it set up. Typically not really, but I do work for artists who have a separate US dollar account within their international banking system. So you might have a separate card for US dollars to Canadian, but typically it's generally the same cards. Wow, how about you guys?
I have not had an issue with Amex too much. Like even in most of Europe, Eastern Europe has been challenging, but sometimes, so I have worked for artists that do have separate business entities in the US, and then they'll have one set up in the UK, and but mostly I've used the Amex. And then I have sometimes had a secondary card that's usually it's a MasterCard as a backup, just in case, but they don't have the same kind of, that's the other thing that business managers tend to like about Amex if they can do it. And in my case, it was even a UK based business managers, like they liked the Amex because typically there's no limit. So that's a big thing that they like about it, because part of what you need a credit card for, even if you're never charging anything on it, is to hold hotels, to hold flights, which there was a question about debit cards, which is why it's not really a preferred thing, because anytime that you would be putting that down to hold a hotel, or you send that to your travel agent and they use it to hold hotels, there's a hold put on it. So all of a sudden, if it's a debit card, you don't have access to that money.
That's a great point.
So I have not, honestly, I've not had too much of a problem with an Amex, but in that case, I did have a secondary card from the UK based business manager that I could use in a pinch. So we did have separate billing, and it was a lot for VAT, but we're not going to go into that. So
it's a real pain in the ass if you are on a busy tour and you have a ton of hotel holds, and then you go to check in, you know, there's an issue with the credit card or something along those lines. So yeah, that's definitely why Amex is used a lot. I just wanted to add a small note that I have been on a tour where the artist has two different business entities and they have different credit cards for each, and you put different types of expenditure on one card versus another. It's not super common, but it does exist, and it is kind of, you know, you need to have, I like to separate them in physical space because they look the same. They just have slightly different business names on the card. So just for keeping myself straight when I'm tired on the road, I'll put them in different places, like different wallets or different parts of my workspace, so that I go to one for one type of expense and I go to another for another.
Wow, I've never seen that. That is rare.
It's a tax thing.
Yeah. The only thing I can recall kind of having different cards. Sometimes I'll get a separate card for my travel agent. I want everything that she does on this one card.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great way to sort of break it out. But typically it's just one card, or maybe a production manager also has one. But here, let's move on. Who's got next?
Pass it over to Doug.
Okay. So we've been talking about credit cards, cash. Let's talk about these reports and sending them to business management. How often do you guys send these reports to business management? And let's also talk about how we send these in and backups that we're making. Are we sending in backup receipts? So who wants to start? Adrian.
Okay.
Oh,
I was going to show a scan of some backup, but Adrian can start if you talk about how often.
When do I send them in? Interesting. In a perfect world, and again, a lot of what we do is based on our schedules, what's going on out there on the road, and what we can accommodate. I like a weekly or bi-weekly. I like to make sure that I am, keeping up on things. And with receipts, with tours that have a heavier receipt flow, it's a little harder to manage that weekly, again. And again, I'm thinking in both positions. Okay. I'm thinking as a tour manager, those receipts are different receipts. On bigger tours, when your production coordinator has the bulk of the float operation, that person also has a different schedule for when they're turning receipts in, whether they're going to reconcile with you, whether they're going to reconcile directly with the business management. What you want to do is somehow find a good balance between what your schedule is, what's going on the road, your workload, and how your tour runs versus what is going to make the business management team happy and effective and help them to do their jobs. So again, it goes back to the communication that you need to have with the folks that are in your wheelhouse to ask them questions about, what kind of timing do you need? What can I have? And listen, if you get jammed up and you're not able to make that deadline, don't stew in anxiety. Send out an email. Listen, I'm a little bit behind. Give me a moment and let's get it together at another time. Just to say that I've seen this go haywire and I've seen it be months later before things are settled. And I just would caution everyone to try and understand that there's a lot of workflow and workload in receipt management, and to figure out a way to get your trick in order so that you aren't ending up behind the 8 ball because you just don't have a good workflow and you haven't sort of figured out the best way to make your time management work for you.
Yeah. And MJ's going to share a receipt scan right now, but I'm going to also ask you guys. So we've all talked about uploading things using scanners and storing our receipts in the cloud. And for me personally, I also keep my all of my account ledgers on the cloud. So my business manager can in real time see my cash reports, my credit card reports, and my receipts as I'm uploading them. So I'm wondering, do you guys send additional reports weekly, or do you just let them have access to what you're uploading as and when they please?
I do both. Because most business managers I work with, they want to get an email with that once a week. It's just, I think it's simple filing probably, but they have access to it in real time.
I'd agree. I'd say I do a little combination of both. And I think staying fluid in the extra, going a little bit above and beyond helps you be better at handling your receipts, handling your finances on the road, because some managers may want it very kind of low maintenance, like, hey, I don't need you to send physical receipts, and I may be fine with just getting receipts in the cloud. And like, I definitely find myself doing a little more, even if they don't need it. And they're like, well, at the end of the tour, they're like, I'm actually glad that you had all those backup receipts and you did a little bit more. And that actually helped me a lot better. So I'd say always try to kind of set the bar a little bit higher than what's kind of becoming norms or trends and things like that. It helps you be better at managing that. Yeah.
Good point. Do you want me to share this now, Doug? It's like, am I good? Okay.
Right.
Let me. So this is just an example of putting together scanning receipts. This was for just a really small tour. I kind of made this up, but so this was per diems. I took names off of it. This is how I handled per diems. We're not going to go deep into per diems on this, but this is how I handled per diems. And you'll notice that I wrote the code here on it, so I could give myself. This is a place where the 930 Club rented themselves out to us to do rehearsals, and a baggage receipt. And yeah, I just put these on. These were runner receipts. So same thing, taped into a piece of paper and scanned. I like to do multiple receipts per page. I see no reason to do one. I just think it's a waste to do one receipt per page. And you can see I made notes. So snacks for rehearsal, hard drive. So I like to make little notes as well. Here's a handwritten receipt, an example. This was for a crew member who, the hotel was oversold, and basically she offered to move in with somebody for the first night. And so we gave her some cash for doing it. Receipts. This is what I do for tips. I make a running total of them. So I made a note. There was a lot of fly gear on this particular thing. So I just made a running total of, this was like mostly bell tips. It wasn't anything at the airport, but that's what I would do also so I keep a running total. I keep a spreadsheet. And then once a week, I just turn in something like this. But something I'd like to note is that I don't number my receipts. And I also never write on the receipts. The only thing that I do is I circle the dates and I circle the totals. And this came from one of my very early tours, and actually working multiple times with a pretty well-known business manager called Mark Kaplan. And he has very strong opinions on this. And it really made sense, because he's like, okay, if you number each week according to your ledger, so it matches up, and then your runner has also numbered them. Now there's 2 different numbers on there. And then you send them to us, and we have a different numbering system where we're just going to do it all at the end of the tour and have one big thing and need to maybe move some of them around depending on if we need to recategorize something. Then all of a sudden there's 3 or 4 different numbers on a receipt. So that can get really confusing. So I don't number receipts, but I will make notes. And that's another thing that's really great about taping them to a piece of paper, because you can make notes on the paper and scan it. But when they get the receipts, they don't have to. Now, I have worked with business managers who like the scans, but at the end of the tour, they're like, just send all the originals for our files. They just like to have them on file. The other thing I wanted to point out that I was thinking about while we were talking was that if you are in a foreign country, and I am specifically referring to Japan, or maybe Korea, although I find Korea a little easier to remember because it seems to be more English, but Japan will have no English on a receipt. And you definitely that is my exception, where I will write on the receipt immediately what it was for, because I have my first tour ever in Japan. I got home and I had this envelope of these receipts, and I was like, oh my God, what are these for? And I had to, and at the time, there wasn't the easy Google Translate where you could just point your phone at the receipt and it tells you what it is in English or whatever your
Absolute
language
game changer.
is. It was
Yeah.
oh my God. So I highly recommend that you keep track of those every single day, and also put Google Translate on your phone and turn on the camera function because it will, oh my God, it's amazing for receipts when you're not sure what you had.
It was a little, yeah, the beta earlier testing wasn't too great, but now it's like really dialed in. Like you can take a scan and it's, yeah, I mean, it reads everything super smooth. So
Yeah.
definitely download Google Translate if you haven't yet.
Yeah. So that's my 2 cents. But that's how I scan them. That's how I mean, that's an example of what we've all been talking about. But I do them on just one big sheet. That would be my week. I just do it by week. And so there's one file per week, and I'll put it in a Dropbox and email it so they can.
MJ and Adrian, a question for both of you guys really quick. So because we've had a class on greening of the tours, like when you guys are taping receipts, do you double side or do you guys use scrap paper when you're taping the receipts just to try to save trees and stuff?
I use scrap paper. I don't do double side, but that's really more at the request of most business managers, because if they're dropping them, if they want the originals and they're dropping them in a file, if they didn't want the originals, I would totally tape them to 2 sides. Yeah.
I have a question as well, kind of as an extension of that. What if you have a receipt that you only have a PDF of? Let's say you reimburse the crew for an Uber, but you're reimbursing them cash.
Well, if you're
print the physical receipt and then rescan it?
No, I don't.
Yes.
If you're on Mac, like a lot of us are, you can open up preview and open up thumbnail view and just go bink and drop your PDF into the thumbnails, and it just becomes one of the.
That's what I do, but I used to print it because I didn't figure out how to do that.
Yeah, it depends. It just depends on if I have the moment to do the juggling of, most of the time, if we're scanning receipts, we can edit a PDF and insert things and change the way that things flow. I definitely, these days, I am finding that I'm sending hard copy receipts less and less. Once they're scanned over, they don't want that backup. And so I do double side. I do absolutely use whatever scrap paper is available. And then I double stick it, and then I go through the scanning process, and I will haul them around. I feel like there's a safety net in having that backup. So I'll keep it in the case for a while until I'm positive that we're reconciled and that everything is good and that there are no questions that are going to come back to me about it before I dispose of them. Sometimes I really want the business manager. Sometimes I will arbitrarily send them that hard copy backup and go, here you go. If you, in fact, do not want these backed up receipts, the hard copies, you dispose of them. Because there's something about, I think, just the last several years of what we do and having everything in analog, it still feels strange to me to throw out the receipts or to dispose of them or shred them, even though we've reconciled electronically. Still,
and I would just say as a mini tip, if you're I would get into the habit, if you have a ton of cash receipts that you don't have, physical hard copy receipts that you don't want to print, get into the habit of putting them to the end of your daily, when you're inputting them. That way, if you've put in, like on MJ's receipts there, where you have 2 physical receipts side by side, you want to be able to slot them in order compared to how you've input them on your cash ledger. So that's a small thing, but it gets kind of funky if they're reading through and they don't see the receipts exactly in the order that you put them in.
Yeah. And also, if I get receipts that are PDF only, like we bought something, because increasingly people buy stuff from Amazon, because Amazon Prime will deliver it to the venue the next day. I have a folder that I put them in. So it's kind of like having, an envelope for your physical receipts. I just immediately put them all in there. I wanted to bring up something Angelique Mark posted in the chat, which is amazing. She said, a taping tip I learned from another PC, use scrapbook glue stick so that if you have to reposition a receipt or end up returning an item and need the receipt after you've taped it down, it comes off cleanly.
That's a brilliant, brilliant hack.
Yeah.
That's a
Really good.
That is a brilliant hack.
Yeah. I learned the glue stick. Yeah. From Mary Jo Spillane used to always make me use glue instead of tape. Probably for that same reason. It's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really good.
I'm always retaping. It's almost a fact of life that the Hippie Art Project continues.
Staples is about to get a run on glue sticks right now.
5-1.
I love how we're all learning something every class. I mean, like, I would have never thought of that, but thanks, Angelique. That was a really good one.
Yeah, that's a great
So
one.
onto our next section is about runners. So most of our cash receipts are generated by production runners buying things for us each day. We have them sign for a certain amount of float, then return receipts and cash at the end of the day, matching that float amount. These receipts go into our general tour bookkeeping. How do each one of you guys settle with your runners? And I will start with Mr. Runge.
I just do it. I mean, I do them daily. Whenever I do it the next day, I just do the receipts when I get them. You know, I just include that whole packet as my stuff I enter the next day.
How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I can agree a little bit. I take care of it on a day-to-day basis. Ensure that all the cash matches up. Go through with the runner to ensure that everything's been met for the day and that we're in a good standing. And any kind of like cash spillover, make sure that's accounted for. Go into books and so on and so forth, and ensure that it's all taken care of by the end of the show. You know, square away with my runners. Yeah.
And Henry, how about you?
You know, I was thinking, I was thinking that maybe it depends on how many runners I have, because if I have 2 or 3, I may be deciding to settle with them at different times. Like, I want this runner to come see me, you know, before the show's done, but then this runner is still going to be out. So I'm going to end up settling with them just before bus call because they're my late runner or something. And so I think about the times in the night when you are going to settle with them. If it's just one, yeah, end of the night, it's probably the last thing I'm going to do. I tend to keep my runners as like my just in case. I need to know that my artist is happy and they don't want anything else out from the world. We're all good. Okay, great. Now let's settle that out. You know, at the end of the night.
And how about you, Doug?
Pretty much the same. If it's a smaller tour with one runner, I might ask them if they use a scanning app and if they can be sending them to me during the day, because then I can just receive the photo, ping it straight to the cloud, and I have a running total. I mean, it saves a couple of minutes at the end of the day, but yeah, nothing too different from everyone else.
MJ?
A couple of things. I always stagger my runners on a big tour. Because I'm really very particular about keeping them to 12 hours. I just want them to be safe. And I want to know that my people are getting in a van with somebody safe. So because of that, to cover a whole day, it's not too hard because we end up staggering, you know, so we're not hitting them all at once. So the production coordinator's typically not settling with them all at once. So usually at the end of the day, because like Henry said, it's like, if there's like something last minute, I don't want to have to refloat them. Another thing that I have not used this, but I know that there's some people on tour. There's a new app called Event Runner Pro that some people use. I believe that Kim Burkhart, who has been our guest before, has used it for her runners. So it's an app that you can just have your runner just load for free for the day, and I think it has a function in it that's a scanner app, and it can drop up, you know, the production coordinator, whoever's with the runners, like can log into that app and just see everything for that day. I haven't used it, but I know some people that are using it and really love it. So that's something I want to throw out there.
Okay.
But yeah, I pretty much do it at the end of their shift when I can.
All right. And then I'm saving the best for last because Adrian deals with a bazillion runners. So how about you, Adrian? And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, just, you know, my tricks are my little envelopes that I shared with you guys earlier, and just a lot of tracking, and a lot of making sure that I look at the runners, and sometimes if runners are jamming, you have to refloat them. And we don't always have time to settle with a runner in the middle of the day, but they have a big pickup and they need another infusion of cash, what I do is I will go back to that first receipt, or like, again, on the fly, post it. Better than nothing. If you're on the move and you're down the hall somewhere and you need to give somebody some money, you run, you grab some money. If you don't have time to sit down and be super, organized, just make sure you're protecting yourself. It's just as easy to scribble your initials and have your runner scribble initials on a receipt or a piece or a sticky as it is to go, here's your money. Let's hope we remember what we just did on the fly tonight at midnight.
Yeah.
Also, you know what I mean? Also, to MJ's point, we really are trying to not have 18-hour runner shifts, although I've done them and we've done, that's been the norm. So staggering runners also means you may have to do a midday settlement, or somebody's leaving and somebody's staying. So there's a movement of cash between runners. Just making sure that you have little hacks in your life that you're able to keep track of all the cash that you give runners, and when and if there's a re-up, and then when you take it back. Just make sure that you're tracking. However that method is. Over the years, when I learn new things or I pick up tricks from my friends and colleagues, adjust as you go, but just make sure that especially if you have multiple runners, multiple parties, you might have an 8-party runner that goes out and has X amount of dollars and is gone all day and gets lost and then comes back at another time that maybe your production runners, or you've got runners specifically doing transport. So I also try to keep track of who's doing what and where they are. And that's all speaks to the bookkeeping. And it's really, this is when, your air traffic control abilities come in. I hope I've answered it concisely for you.
Well, because you answered my second question, was how do you deal with chaotic days? So you answered all of that in one.
Yeah, chaos happens, even if you are in Groundhog Day mode where, production, it's loading in, it's setting up, the timing is pretty much the same. You know what you're doing. Things will happen. There are variables that happen in venues. You have people on the road with you. So it's a live moving organism. There's bound to be stuff. So best.
I have a question. What's the most amount of runners you've had to deal with?
10.
Wow. That's a lot of runners.
Actually, probably more, but 10 for sure.
I've only
somewhere. I'm gonna go somewhere around 7 to 10.
On Push Daddy, we had like 18 acts, but we managed it with 5 runners every day.
Right. Well, and sometimes,
much less. Yeah.
Sometimes there might be a situation where when you're on a multi-act tour where somebody's deal has a runner in it.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, if I can delegate off, even if I'm giving a runner, if there's extra runner stuff happening, I'd like to hand that runner to a delegate of that party to sort them out soup to nuts, cash, instructions, and so on. And then I keep in touch with that runner and I say, you go to that person. And when you're done with that person, you come back to me. Don't stray, make sure we stay tight. That's the best way to manage it all, I think.
Well, Dave Boken has some great comments in the chat, but my next question is for MJ. Yesterday we spoke about PEX cards instead of giving runners cash. Can you explain a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, and PEX cards, it's a brand, but and I was sitting here kind of frantically looking while we were talking to see if they work internationally, and I think they do because they're a prepaid card. They're prepaid. I believe they're branded with Visa. So they're a prepaid card that's meant for small to medium-sized businesses to use for expense control. So you can hand those cards to your runners. I know people I've used them on events, and I have not used them for runners on tour, but I know people who have. And so what happens is you fund the cards. You can have multiple cards. You can have 4 or 5. You can fund the cards. Usually it's your business manager that's doing it. And it's nice because you can log in and see immediately what's going on each card, where it's been charged. What I typically do, because I have not I'm not sure if PEX has changes because it's been a minute since I've used PEX cards, but I would have the, I just set up for the runners to then take a picture of their, of the receipt so that I could match it up, take a picture and text it to me, or just bring it back and text them all to me. Is a little bit inelegant, but you know, but they're great because I think that I really do feel like we're going to, and it's not just because of the time and place we're in. I do think we're going to move towards more cashless in general. And they are, you will, I feel like that if we can, if they, as they get more streamlined, we'll end up using those more. It's really secure. It's nice because you can log in and you can just see what's being spent in real time. And then you have your report right there to match up, you know, and in fact, you can even drop it in, you know, you just download it. You can see it in real time, but you can download it as an Excel file. So you can drop it into your accounting. But they work pretty well. It's like, you know, you can have your business manager top them up and you just give your runner a PIN, and you can actually change the PIN. So you can change it after every runner, so it becomes secure. But I feel like we'll see those more and more. So PEX is the one that I've used the most. But there are other cards, but I believe that those are it's just basically a prepaid business card. So.
All right. Thanks, MJ.
Mhm.
On to you, Adrian.
So we chat a little bit about how we do transportation these days and the integration of the Uber, Lyft app ride sharing situation to our lives, and how we track those expenses, and whether or not we use the Uber business account when that's appropriate, and what that is for those who may not know. You can program a business account via Uber where you put a credit card down, and then you invite users via email to become your certified or approved users to go ahead and use that account. And what happens is the end user will add the additional account to their phones. And when they're calling an Uber, they have the opportunity to then toggle between the user, their personal Uber account, and then the business account. For me, I do that in a couple of scenarios. If we are somewhere rehearsing, and let's say, you know, maybe we're rehearsing in a place where a majority of the folks are at home and they can self-drive, but we do have some team members who have to be picked up or Ubered. We'll make sure that those folks for those rehearsals, because it's a daily thing, because then, you know, you're not laying out cash after cash, and somebody else isn't racking up daily Uber charges on their personal credit cards, which is a point of contention, obviously, sometimes. So the way to, you know, work around that is for Uber Business. However, I don't use it for, and also bus drivers, you know, your bus drivers are going to, maybe if you've got super late bus calls and we are not holding runners until 2, 3, 4, depending, you are going to have your bus drivers come back via Uber. That's also a great, or Lyft, whatever's in the area. That's a great time to use that business account. I don't use it for travel in and travel out. Let's say that you are asking people to Uber to and from the airports on the beginning and the ends of the trips. I do not use the business account for that. You know, there's just because there's a lot of potential for error if folks who are not using Uber on a regular basis, maybe they have it in their app and they're out somewhere and they're, you know, they've gone out on a night off and they're trying to get back, and then they've now not switched from their personal to the business, and now you've got personal rides on the business account, and now you're chasing that cash chargeback or figuring out how you're going to do that. So I would love to just go around and see if anybody has anything to add as to what they're doing with Uber. Jim, how do you use the ride sharing apps?
Same. If I have a business account, I set that up. I set my drivers up on that, and I use it for my principals, or when I'm, if they call and say I need an Uber and they want me to order something, I use it for that. But I treat, like you said, in and outs for people. I treat like a taxi cab. I make sure they send me the email. A lot of times, you just forward me the email, and I just add it to my accounting and pay them accordingly.
I have a quick tip. I just have one quick tip when it comes to Lyft and Uber. If you are primarily flying Delta, use Lyft. You get Delta points.
Interesting hack.
Yeah.
And
Did not know.
And Henry, you also get Hilton points, Delta and Hilton.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Concurrently? Oh, I have Delta
Yep.
attached. I didn't know that. Ooh.
I didn't know.
I have
either.
Delta
Hilton
and
account.
Hilton attached to my Lyft. So
Okay.
that's a great tip, though,
That's good to
Henry.
know.
I do as well. Yeah, it's great.
Like life hacks from the team. Does anybody have, just show of hands really quick, anybody have anything to add to the Uber Lyft conversation other than the hacks that we've discussed and how to do? Going once.
I mean-
you ready to have a bad score on Uber if artists act up on your account? That's all.
That's why,
that's-
that's why it's good to have the business account if you can
Yeah.
not have them on your personal one. And a new thing that's coming in is we're running over, so I don't want to go in deep on this, but the Bird scooters, electric scooters. Normally, I just let
hate
people look
those.
after themselves, but you're on a smaller theater tour. You have a day room that's a mile away. It's not only cheaper, more environmentally friendly, but it's also kind of fun to use the scooters. And I have had people trying to submit receipts for $1.50 for an electronic scooter, and I'm like, no, just don't bring this.
That's really funny. I have
That'd be a
scooter
big
gangs. I have scooter gangs on my tours, and I have not received any receipts for scooter transport yet.
Okay, well, good to know.
That's a big fat nope.
I'm going to ask you guys a question about tipping. And, I'm the only European on here, former European, sadly now, on here, but the only non-American. Tipping is not the same in Europe. The culture of it is different, but ultimately in touring, we have certain things that we have to tip for. One of them being bus drivers, hotel concierge services, things of that nature. So how do you account for tipping and budget for tipping, I guess? Anyone want to take that?
I'll go first. For gratuities for tipping the bus drivers and truck drivers, I usually ask the business manager at first, is it customary that you guys tip the drivers? And some say yes, some say no. And if they say yes, I just put a number in my budget. So at the end of the tour, I know that, hey, I'm going to pull out that cash to pay these drivers. But how about you, MJ?
So for buses, I think in the US, same thing, I'll ask business management. In the US, I don't really have to ask the bus company because tipping is a thing. In Europe, I actually will check with the bus company because sometimes they don't want you to. And it just is a function of how they're being paid, taxation. Typically they're fine with it, but I just like to check. I have tipped out bus drivers there once on a pretty grueling UK run. We gave them a nice tip at the end. And typically for me, I would say if it's a tour that's maybe 3 or 4 weeks, my rule of thumb has always been the equivalent of 1 day's pay and for each driver. And if it's longer, then we just it's one of those things where we kind of just feel it out from there. So I don't have any hard formula.
I would have to agree between 5-1 and MJ. Always make sure you're consulting business management. Don't assume. Make sure you're touching base with your team, and make sure that you're adding a gratuity line once you've kind of covered your grounds there. Also, with a lot of bus companies moving into more of an inclusive route, make sure you're touching base with them because they may be covering extra percentages or it may be factored into the deal. And just make sure you cover your grounds before you just kind of dive right in. And I think it'll take you the furthest.
For the sake of budgeting, I kind of plan at $50 per week per driver, but I use that as my basis. I give them more or less depending on if it's a good driver or not, and change and all that kind of stuff. But that's my framework.
And we're going to move into dealing with multiple currencies with MJ. How do you handle
So I'm
multiple
going to keep this
currencies,
brief,
especially
'cause
like you're in Europe?
Yeah, people do this different ways, but the way I do it, and I find that's the easiest, is I never mix currencies. So I always, like, if I'm in North America and primarily we're doing the US, and then we're going to go to Canada for like a couple days, we're going to Mexico for a couple days, it's not anything major. I have my master currency account, so it would be US dollars. If we're in Europe, I usually make my master account wherever we start. So it's going to either be in pounds or it's going to be in euros, sometimes both, depending on how long we're staying. But so I always transfer, for example, I'll use Europe because there's many different currencies. So say my master account is in pounds. If I need to transfer money, so say we're just in, we're in Denmark for a couple of days, or Sweden, I'll deduct 500, say, pounds from my master account, exchange it for kroners, then that goes as an entry on the tab that's for kroners, for Sweden, let's say. And then I work from that, and I don't exchange it back. I always keep separate currency. So I'm in like, say the next country we're going to is Spain and we're in euros, then I would transfer from pounds to euros. Now it's a little bit different if I'm picking up from the promoter and I'm picking up in euros, that deposit just goes straight into the euros tab. So I always keep a separate account for each currency. And if I need to exchange, I exchange from whatever my master account is. So it's a deduction there and an addition to whatever currency I exchanged it into, if that makes sense. So I try to keep it just really clean. And then also for runners, because I was just thinking about this while we were talking about runners, what I do, like say I have one show in a country that I'm not carrying currency and it just doesn't make sense for me to exchange, I'll ask the promoter if they can float the runner, and the runner just buys everything. And then in settlement, what I do is I get all those receipts and I just have them deduct that amount from settlement. So we settle out and then they just deduct it from what they owe me. So I never even, like, the money just becomes a concept. It's just on paper. So that's a really good way to keep clean accounting if you're in a country that has a different currency for one day. And it's really, actually, it's exceptionally handy in Eastern Europe where there's some places.
And I do that with techs in Toronto all the time. Mm-hmm. If we're dipping across the border for one, like if we're going from New York up into Toronto and then dropping back down, I don't necessarily want to go change cash for one show in a different, in a separate currency.
Yeah. You may not even have time,
Yeah.
So I will ask.
Really simple.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that, because I will definitely.
There's a little more to it than that, but yes. Yeah.
Definitely ask the promoter to please float the runners with some float, and then we settle that in settlement. Brilliant. Thank you for adding that.
And if anybody has questions about different currencies, like I just kept it super simple, but if anybody's ever wants like a little more tips about drawing from one account to the other, I'm happy to answer. But
yeah, I just wanted to add quickly, if your merch seller can generally take a float from the house for cash if they're dealing in cash, and also talk to your crew before you go to Europe. And generally on every European tour I only deal in pounds and euros, because you'll dip into Scandinavia, but you'll be there for one day, and those are different currencies at each day. If you have catering anyway, give your per diems out in euros or pounds. Clear that with your crew ahead of time so they know that's happening, but they're not going to spend those kroner, or their Swiss francs or the Polish zloty. So I tend to just have the GBP and euro, do my per diems in that, and if they go at the bar afterwards, they can pay with credit card.
And that leads us really well into our final topic, which is, what do you do when you have cash left over, whether you're in your home country or you're in any other country? And what I like to do, I know we all have different things we like to do, but what I like to do is that I like to pay the hotel. I kind of start planning it out. I see what I have on hand ahead of time. And, I like the last hotel, or like say it's the hotel we're staying in before we fly home. I like to just, and if I have more cash than I'm going to need for that, I dump it in the last two hotels. But that's a really good way to get rid of cash. and then you end up with a cash receipt you just enter. And then you don't have to worry about carrying it. You don't have to worry about having a whole bunch of cash you have to declare. You don't have to worry about however you need to get it to your business manager. So I just will keep what I need to. Maybe if I'm rolling it over to another leg and need to keep on some
So
on
are you
hand,
like-
I'll keep it. But
Are you like pushing a bag of change on that hotel lobby desk?
no, sometimes no. I mean, I try to get rid of change, but yeah. So and also
the
if it's
shrapnel.
yeah, shrapnel. Usually if I if it's going to be a really big invoice, like 10,000 pounds or something, I call ahead. I arrange it with the sales manager and I say, hey, I want to pay for this in cash. And they're happy to take it, but they just have it prepared. So you go back to their safe room, but it's a really good way to get rid of cash.
Yeah.
I think that's my preferred way to do it. So how about, and I know 5-1, you said you will go to Amex.
Yeah, if I'm overseas, I will go to Amex. So because sometimes when you're coming back in the States, you can't have a certain amount of dollars to enter into the country. So I'll go to Amex and dump a lot of stuff. But I like your idea also of dumping it at hotels, or I just go to Amex and just dump it there if I don't really need it, if it's going to be a foreign currency. But here in the States at the end, I'm going to start using your idea of dumping it at hotels and stuff. Anybody else?
I paid crew members. I paid ground transport to the airport. I paid, I think just whatever you do with it, make sure you have a receipt for it and that it's properly accounted for. And, if they accept cash and your business manager is fine with it, then it's going to help them because they're not going to lose on transfer on exchange fees. So if you've gone to Europe and you've hired a local tech and you have a bunch of euros, ask them if they're happy to take half their, if you've got, I don't know, $5,000 in cash, put that towards their invoice, get a receipt for it. And I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with that.
I want to point out that that in America, if you have people that are on payroll, you can't pay them that way. But in Europe, where everybody's a freelancer and invoicing, then that's another good way.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say I'm kind of a combination of my colleagues here. I mean, consult your business manager, make sure that cash is going in the right spots, and make sure that you're on the same page with your team, and that there's receipts and that there's no loose ends there. But just put it where it's needed. And if not, just make sure it gets back to your team in some capacity, back to business management.
Yeah. I mean, if it's flow, I have to, make sure it gets back to business management. Sometimes I've actually ended a tour in LA and I've been able to bring everything right to their office. Here you go. Here's the cash receipts. But then there's other, maybe I have a small envelope of cash from I don't know, tour fines or something. And, but that's cash that somehow it belongs to the tour, but then it's just like a bank of cash that we don't really know what to do with. So sometimes that goes to pay for the end of tour party, stuff like that. You can get creative ways to, if approved, spend whatever's cash left to thank everybody for the hard work they've just done for you.
If you're going abroad, again, just one last thought. If you're coming back from Europe, but you're going back in 3 weeks' time or 6 months' time, keep that cash because it's going to be useful for you when you go back out.
And one more thing on that I just thought of is that sometimes I'll check with business management and, when you're flying internationally, they're always collecting shrapnel for charity. And if I have tons of coins, I'll check with them and say, can I throw this in there? And you don't get a receipt for it so they can write it off, but usually everybody's happy to, especially if it's the end of a tour and you aren't going to be back for a while, you have no use for it. They're pretty happy for you to do that. Usually I check, but yeah.
I've donated a whole banker's bag full of change once to a local charity. We were just getting, it was the end of tour, our box of soap and shampoos was full. And I actually had a whole bunch of change that I knew business management was not going to want. And so they were like, yep, just, donate it. And so we were able to, the last runner on the last show took the box of donations and change that I was going to have left, and we donated it. So, but still always make sure it's approved. That's not your money, folks.
That's important. That's important. It's a great thought to want to wrap up the cash by giving, back to the folks, but you've got to make sure that somebody who is cash management understands and approves that that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Sometimes that is just going to be my rollover cash into the next leg. Turn that into euros or vice versa. So
yeah. I wanted to grab a question from the birthday girl, Miss Elise Turner, really quick about just going back to, she asked, what if there's multiple categories on one sheet? Let's say a runner goes to Walmart and picks up a number of things, some of which are catering, some of which are dressing rooms, some of which are the production supply. I do not belabor the different categories on one receipt. That receipt will probably go to miscellaneous production expense. If we need to break it down that way, and I know, for example, if there's going to be a huge purchase, for example, I send you to buy a TV and then some toothpaste and so on and so forth, I may ask that the large item that may be a different expense gets its own receipt, and then the other little miscellaneous, we're not splitting hairs over $4 or $5. Also, when I spoke about compiling the receipts into categories and line items, just quickly, I will take all of the Home Depot type receipts, which could be a production expense, all of the food and catering type expenses, and so on in categories. I will tabulate them. I will then put that line item, miscellaneous production expenses, X amount of dollars. That will be receipt packet number 1. Then I will take those specific receipts to that account or line item or expense category, and I'll tape them neatly together. Packet number 1, miscellaneous production expenses, $275. At the bottom of the page, I'm going to tabulate the page expenses. This page is $75. This page is $60, and so on until I reach the total that's at the top. And then that's a packet that addresses that expense. It's packet number 1. On the sheet, it's line item number 1. When there's a ton of expenses and tons of receipts, you will break your brain if you think that you are just going to itemize and line item every single receipt. As long as you have the conversation with the folks that you're reporting to, that this works for them so they know where to look things. That's my way of condensing my workload, Elise. And if any further questions on that one, because we're going to wrap, please hit me up directly. I'm happy to chop it up further with you in a DM somewhere.
I only have one last tip. After you're done with your accounting, wash your hands. Cash is disgusting. Cash is so gross. I keep sanitizer not in with my paper receipts in case it spills, but I always keep it around when I'm doing accounting for some reason because I think it's so gross to so much cash.
I agree.
I love.
I have
the fact that we're
sanitizer
doing
when
more
I'm
and
doing
more.
per diem for everyone. I have sanitizer, boom, right when I'm done.
I
Great
try to
tip.
take my tours as cashless as possible. I love, I really do, and I think that's the way of the way forward.
I say it all the time, but I really enjoyed this episode. It's so much fun just nerding out.
That was great.
Stuff. I'm glad we could get to this one finally, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are so excited to get back to our core classes and just kind of get things back up and running with Tour Management 101. We're excited to be back next Monday. Please keep updated with us on our socials. Make sure to like and subscribe our YouTube channel to keep updated with us there. Doug and the team's gonna be moderating on Clubhouse every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we got a lot of fun stuff coming across our social platform. So stay updated with us. We'll see you on Monday, and have a great week.
Be safe, everybody. See you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.